So the founders of this app that you see here right on my screen, this is Cal AI, they just exited. It's estimated to be somewhere around $100 million. But the cool thing about this app is that the founders of this app, they weren't even 20 years old when they coded this thing. And what's also cool is that they've done this in under 2 years. So in under 2 years, they've achieved a more than $30 million a year annual run rate, and they were just acquired. So that being said, in this video, I actually just want to cover three really key shifts that are happening right now in technology as we speak in 2026, in April and beyond. I think that this is really going to change the landscape for technology companies in the future, as well as how a lot of solo founders and developers or product people like myself need to be aware of as we're building out this technology. All right, so the first shift is that product management and distribution is really going to hold the leverage over just kind of coding syntax. I'm not saying engineers' only job is just writing code. They're thinking about architecture, database models, and security, and all of those things. But the thing is nowadays is that AI can literally handle the implementation of writing code, which is really the part that takes coders and developers a very long time. Features and loops and all these things in the code that AI can do if they have really, really clear instruction. I have rule files. I have rule files for AI when it's coding in FastAPI, my backend language, when it's coding in Swift, what I'm using for mobile apps and React. These coding rule files are over 200 lines long or more, and they are very strict rule sets that AI needs to follow when it's coding. And the thing is that I know a lot of people say that code generated by AI cannot be used in production. I say false to that. I personally work with an engineer who has over 20 years experience, and she uses AI to help generate a lot of her code because when she takes care of the architectural needs, right, she's able to bring her knowledge of software engineering to AI and give it very strict criteria on how to code and where to code, and it helps to speed up her workflow a lot. If it's easier to just get a functional prototype out there to market, that actually means that the barrier to entry to building software has actually been lowered. Because you see, beforehand, if you didn't know code, if your co-founder wasn't technical or didn't have a lot of money to hire somebody, well, you're kind of out of the game completely. But nowadays, because you can, product management and distribution are going to matter a lot more. So product management is really just about understanding your ideal customer profile, understanding the problem really well of what your product is solving, really focusing on the outcome, not just feature development, and really focusing a lot more on distribution, getting your product out there, right? So right now, a lot of developers are complaining that Apple's review process for app submission is taking a really, really long time. And the reason it's happening is because a lot of these AI apps are allowing anybody to just generate an app. And so Apple is seeing a flood of people all trying to build apps and get them into the App Store. But what's happening though is that a lot of people are falling really in love with just the building and they're not paying attention to product management practices. So we're seeing an overwhelming amount of budget trackers and habit tracker apps and just kind of the same thing, right? And so this is just a really good opportunity for somebody who really understands a specific problem really well, who can execute, to actually leverage AI to actually build something. Because now I think we're going to see an overabundance of software tools and apps out there in the marketplace, and most of them are just never going to get to revenue. I personally think that right now in this time, instead of focusing just on being a better or just how good you can code, right, unless you're a software engineer and that's your job, right? But if you're thinking of actually leveraging agentic coding to actually build software, I think the first thing that you should really pay attention to is product management skills and how do you create distribution for what you're doing. So number two is going to be speed. It's going to be a huge advantage to coding. And just to kind of bring this into perspective. So this here is a little blurry to see, but this chart basically just outlines basically how fast companies went from 1 million to 100 million. So as you see here towards the right, Twilio, which is a communications SaaS platform, and Shopify, which is an e-commerce SaaS platforms, it took them roughly 5 years or more in order to cross this $100 million milestone. However, we see companies today like Lovable, Cursor, and now probably Cal AI are achieving that in less than 2 years, right? So what this basically means is that nowadays, if you're building a company, it doesn't need to take 5 years or a decade to get there. Now, yes, we haven't seen somebody kind of fully vibe code an application actually get to 100 million. I believe the founder of Cal AI, he actually started coding at a really young age, so he has a lot of leverage there. But for a fact, there are people today that are leveraging vibe coding tools and actually building software applications that are bringing them maybe a couple $1,000s a month, maybe a couple $10,000 a month, right? And they're using agentic coding in order to do that. So companies are realizing this and are realizing, okay, we actually don't need a 10-person developer team in order to ship features. We can actually ship more features with a 3-person dev team. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of software companies now might even be able to go as small as maybe 1 or 2 developers. The kind of role of like a front-end style implementation developer may not exist in the future, right? If you are just a developer and you just focus on just kind of coding front ends and making those things pretty, I don't think there's really going to be much of a role in the future, because that's something that AI can easily handle. That's something that a senior engineer would easily just hand off to AI. So again, we're going to see companies build faster. We're going to see companies achieve higher valuations faster as well. The next thing that we're going to see is that we're going to see smaller teams and more revenue. And I think that we're seeing this play out right now. So as I'm recording this video, I think Oracle just laid off like 30,000 employees. I know Block, Square, a few months ago also laid off like 3,000 or so employees. Right? It's very sad, but I don't think that there's some rebound happening where all these employees are just going to get picked up because something's going to turn around the market. I mean, that would be great, but I think that AI is actually going to reduce roles faster than it's going to create roles. And the thing is, companies, understand that they don't need as much headcount in order to get to where they want to get to. So this is another chart that I found here. And as you see here, again, crossing the 100 million annual recurring revenue threshold, you see here companies like LinkedIn, Airbnb, they had to have more than 500 employees before they got there. However, we're seeing AI companies like Cursor, Midjourney, Eleven Labs are getting there, and they're getting there with less than 100 people. So this basically tells you that you don't need as much staff. Like, the amount of staff is no longer directly proportionate to the amount of revenue that a company can produce nowadays. There was another AI tool builder that was also acquired by Wix. They were acquired, and I think they were maybe less than 10 people. So basically, again, companies are realizing that we can do a lot more with a lot less people, and so that's really where they're going to focus on. And so looking from the lens of an employee, I think the best thing you can do is actually position yourself to really show that as a single person you can do a lot more. So, I'm a product manager in tech, but I'm not just a product manager anymore. Now I'm actually building prototypes, and as you see from some of my other videos, I'm actually not just stopping at prototypes. I'm actually learning how do I actually take AI and real architecture and just real kind of developer thinking and actually build apps that can be put in the hands of real users, right? I'm actually really trying to push this thing to another level. And so we're going to see roles transform. We're going to see software engineers who companies are already going to probably put them closer to customers so that there's less of a barrier between the developer who's building the thing and the end customer who gets the benefit of it. We're going to see product managers who understand user needs. We're going to see product managers not just be lost in product requirement documents and writing tickets for developers. We're going to see product managers actually be able to convert user needs into prototypes, which is a much better way to actually communicate that to a development team. Now, the good news on this, while it does create a lot more job pressure, that is a downside. The good news is that if you're somebody who's a founder, this is really good news for you, because this basically means that you can stay lean. So if you're non-technical, you can use tools to actually build your first prototype and get it out there and really figure out where your product market fit is, right? If you are looking to raise money, you probably don't need to raise nearly as much, because whereas maybe you might have needed 3 or 4 developers to get something to market pretty quickly, one developer using artificial intelligence can actually get it there just as fast. So whether you're going bootstrapped, whether you're still looking to raise, AI is really good. AI wins here because, again, you don't need to go get nearly the number of headcount that you needed before in order to achieve these really, really big numbers. So that being said, I actually just wanted to talk about the business model strategy, whether you're looking to build a software as a service application or a mobile app. I spend a lot of time just researching and looking, and again, I'm a product manager. My job is to just kind of look across and just see what's happening. While I spend most of my time in the mobile space, I am paying attention to what's happening in the SaaS space as well. So if you're looking to build like a business-to-business SaaS application, what you want to do is you want to tie what your product does to revenue, right? And the closer that you tie it, the better you're going to be able to charge a higher pricing power, the easier it is going to be to actually sell, and the more sticky your users are going to be, right? You need to be able to draw a connection where your SaaS application can help somebody make more money, save time, or reduce cost, right? So for example, there's a software application called Apollo out there that basically helps companies that sell B2B, right? When I say B2B, I mean business to business. So Apollo allows a company to access information or data on prospects. So a company can buy Apollo, they get this data, they give that data to their sales team begins emailing these people, calling these people, right, whatever the case may be, in order to set meetings and really kind of sell these people on whatever their product is, right? So Apollo has a very close revenue connection to a company, because if a company cannot access data on their prospects, they can't reach out to them. And so, right, it just breaks, right? It breaks their sales process. So Apollo is well positioned. There was recently a company that was actually, not recently, but there was actually a company, funny name, it's called Blotato, that actually allows people to go and actually use AI to mass produce a lot of this kind of AI videos. People call it AI slop, but mass produce AI content. And the thing with that is that, well, we've always kind of known like theme pages and stuff like that on Instagram and TikTok have always kind of been a thing. People make money with that because they publish all this content, they grow the page's big following, and they're able to sell sponsorships and things like that, right? So even in a case or something like that, there's still that revenue connection there, right? So if you cannot really draw the line between, again, what your product does and how it's going to help somebody make more money, save money, if you can't really draw the line for that, it's going to be harder for you to scale. Now, traditionally with SaaS, the model has always kind of been where, let's say, for example, if you're spending, if your product is like $20 a month, you may have to go spend $60 to actually acquire a customer. You have to hope that they stay long enough to where you make your $60 back. It's a very tough model, and that's kind of why a lot of SaaS companies had to raise money, because besides building it, they had to kind of fund this thing where they're burning money in the front end, right? But they're eventually making it back later on. Now, if you have a product that's, let's say, priced at $100 a month, or let's say even $200 a month, right? Let's say $200 a month for a SaaS product that can actually help a company maybe access the right type of data. What you can do is that you can actually pull that person into an actual sales process. You can pull that person into a Zoom meeting where you can talk about the value of what your product does, how it's going to help their company, and then you can also make a pitch, right? So instead of you saying, hey, at $200 a month, this is $2,400 over a year. Instead of that, I can do $2,000 right now. I can do $1,500 right now if you buy it annually. So now you can spend $300 closing a customer, but because they're paying annually, you're now profitable on the front end. And even as a bootstrap company, that's a model that you can actually scale. But again, if you're kind of like a lower price or lower ticket SaaS product, right, you can't really afford like a more manual sales process or really a call-based sales process like that. So it's going to be harder to just acquire customers. It's going to be harder to actually scale your business. All right, so again, that's a model that I see winning in B2B SaaS. When it comes to consumer apps are all about retention, right, lifetime value, and just understanding user behavior. In order to win in the consumer app space, you really want to focus on, or really want to build your app around what's like one core job. In the case of Cal AI, they really built their brand around being able to take a picture of your food and get the calorie nutritional value from it. I had a calorie tracking app before, and I could tell you that I hated the process because literally, like when I got a meal, I had to go into the app. If it's a meal from a restaurant, maybe it's logged in a database somewhere. If it's not, then I had to go through even more pain having to find the ingredients and kind of rebuild this meal in this app, right? And so something that should be super duper simple now takes more time. And so Cal AI came in and they just replaced that process entirely. Oftentimes, really good software products are products that remove or replace how something is done to where I would say friction in that process is cut. I mean, Uber's a really good example of that as well. Calling a taxi way back in the day was just more of a process. You had to call them, you didn't know where they were, they could tell you 10 minutes, but they really took 15 minutes, right? When you got in the cab, you really didn't know how much they were going to charge you. Taxis were incentivized to actually drive slower because they can actually drive up the meter. I'm old enough to actually remember that experience. Uber, you get upfront pricing, you know where the driver is, right? You know the driver is a safe driver, there's a star rating, right? And so again, they're just kind of replacing an old behavior, but the behavior was always there, right? Same thing with Airbnb. People always stayed in hotels, and the concept of a bed and breakfast is actually not a newer thing. Like, it's actually existed before. So again, when it comes to consumer apps, you really want to focus on really one core job. You want to really build for a habit loop, and you really want to do everything you can to retain users. So growth in a consumer product, or even in a SaaS product, but growth really looks like this, where you have all these users that come in, and you're gonna have drop off that happens, but eventually at some point you wanna have this flat line here happen. And basically what that means is that users are being retained, right? If you have a product where you have all these users coming in and this drops straight to zero, that means that you're not retaining users and you're not gonna grow with a model like this. So kind of like the same thing in SaaS. In consumer products, if you are paying $20 to get a paying user, but that user only pays you $5 a month, you have to hope that they stay long enough to where you make that money back. However, if you were to charge $50 a year for your product and you're paying $20 to acquire a customer, all of a sudden you're profitable on the front end, and that's an operation you can scale. So again, these are just kind of the three shifts that I see happening in technology in 2026. And whether you're, like myself, an employee and you're looking to stay relevant, or whether you're a founder looking to grow, I think you know, you definitely cannot ignore these things happening here. All right, so anyway, with that being said, thanks so much for checking out this video, and I'll see you in the next one.